Speaker.
Dr. Russel Norman.
My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he agree with the United Nations Secretary-General, Ban Ki-moon, that, quote, by tackling climate change head-on, we can solve many of our current troubles, including the threat of global recession, end quote? If so, how will he respond to the Secretary-General's call for a Green New Deal?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker. Mr Speaker, yes, I do agree with Ban Ki-moon that the world must tackle climate change and that New Zealand must play its part, but I'm of the view that in terms of tackling the global recession, given the size and severity of that recession, it will take much more than just good climate change policy.
Dr. Russel Norman.
My question to the Prime Minister asks, why did he tell Investigate magazine that maybe the climate sceptics are right? And does he accept the scientific evidence of human-induced climate change, yes or no?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, I do agree that human-induced climate change is real, and I simply pointed out, if the member wants to go and read the whole quote, that actually it's quite important that countries have flexibility in their climate change legislation, and the reason for that is that you need to be adaptable as the science firms up, and that you can tackle the new issues as they come along.
Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Is the Prime Minister concerned that by appearing to continue to call into question international science on climate change, as he does in this month's Investigate magazine, he will cause reputable groups other than Greenpeace to follow Greenpeace's example yesterday and withdraw from participation in the ETS Select Committee process?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, firstly, Mr Speaker, if Greenpeace don't want to come along and give a submission to the Special Select Committee on Climate Change, I say that's their loss. And secondly, I'd assume someone who's very interested in climate change can also read, and then they would go on and read the full quote, which said, but at this stage I think it would be irresponsible of us not to play our part when it comes to climate change.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question to the Prime Minister, does he agree with the Australian Treasury's conclusion that taking a wait-and-see approach to climate change, which doesn't seem too far from what the Prime Minister is proposing, is going to make our economy suffer in the long term as global investment flows go elsewhere? In other words, if we snooze, we're going to lose.
The Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, we're not taking a wait-and-see approach. What we are doing is putting together a select committee which we are charging them with the responsibility of coming up with the right response to climate change, making sure that there's balance between our environmental responsibilities and our economic opportunities. But if any party wants to take responsibility for snoozing and losing, it would be the Labor Party, who for 8 years talked a big game when it came to climate change and actually delivered Zippo.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order, 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 order. The member has a right to ask a question.
To the Prime Minister, is he confident that his commitment that he expressed just now to addressing both the climate crisis and the economic crisis is shared across his government? This is in light of his Treasurer's statement to the Finance and Expenditure Committee last week that, quote, I think one crisis at a time might just do most governments.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, you would expect the Minister of Finance to be primarily focused with the global recession because it's a very significant issue, and that's what he's doing. What a fine job he is doing of placing New Zealand in the best position that you can. But from the government's point of view, I can the member can rest assured that we are taking a serious view when it comes to climate change, but we will be having a balanced response.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Has the Prime Minister had a conversation with the Minister of Tourism about the government's own research that shows that New Zealand's clean and green reputation is worth more than $1 billion per year in export earnings? And if so, will he make the kind of Green New Deal investments needed to protect that clean and green reputation, such as riparian planting and fencing off streams and rivers?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, I can assure the member the Prime Minister often has conversations with the Minister of Tourism, and he finds them all ears and quite enthusiastic in his ideas. But what I can say is anyone who is engaged in tourism will understand the importance of the environment when it comes to New Zealand and promoting New Zealand, as indeed I think all New Zealanders do, take pride that we are an environmentally friendly country which wants to preserve our environment. And in fact, there's one of the reasons why the Minister of Tourism is very keen on a cycleway from Kaitaia to Bluff.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What are the...
Order. Order. The member must be heard with his question. Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What are the government's contingencies in the event that our billion-dollar clean and green reputation collapses under the pressure of the last years of inaction that the Prime Minister has referred to, and what would be our perception of the lack of action at the moment and our exports suffer? What is the government's contingency to deal with that risk to the New Zealand economy?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, the contingency is that the government is going to work aggressively on getting a balanced response to environmental responsibilities and our economic issues. But, I think that the member also needs to recognise probably the biggest single risk to countries taking climate change policy seriously is actually the global recession. And the leaders that I talk to, I can assure the member, are actually so focused on the recession that actually they are not that focused on climate change at the moment.
John Keey.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Does he agree that the first priority is to review the cost and benefits to New Zealand of any policy action on climate change? And what is the government's timetable for completing such work?
The Honourable Prime Minister.
I can confirm that was part of the confidence and supply agreement with the ACT Party, that will be occurring. I'm not sure about the timescale in which it will take to complete that work, but work will be taken to ensure that we have a sense of the issue.
Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister agree that what the Australian Treasury report showed, which is probably the most extensive, one of the most extensive studies that have been done so far, is that the major cost to our economy will be if we don't take action quickly and we don't take action hard? If we don't act hard and fast on climate change, then we will suffer economic costs and consequences as a result. And that, in fact, is the major risk to us. It's if we don't take action quick enough.
The Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, look, it is my view that we have to take action, but we also have to take the right action, because if the member's inference by using the term hard is that we should simply tackle the issue of climate change with no reflection on the impact on our economy, then I think that's unacceptable. And I don't think the New Zealand public would support a position where our only focus was one of solving greenhouse gas emissions and to hell with their job.